the MGM Grand outside the box office and the media center, where people are working hard to get in their reports on Canelo Bivol. And, you know, I have to say something that's come up recently, something that hasn't honestly surprised me, but continues to pop up, is the fact that so many people seem to be against Canelo, regardless of what he does, regardless of who he decides to take on. The boo birds come out. I could kind of understand the criticism for the fight that he had against Avni Yildirim. However, even for that fight, I mean, there was a reason that it happened. It happened because Avni Yildirim was the mandatory challenger, and if Canelo wanted to keep that WBC title, that WBC title, he had to defend against Avni Yildirim, who had been promised a shot. But this came up in the press conference. A reporter, forget what outlet he was from, essentially asked Eddie Hearn, why not Charlo? Why not Benavidez? Why not Errol Spence Jr.? And Eddie's response to that actually made a whole lot of sense to me. Eddie's response to that was, what do those fighters really have to offer Canelo Alvarez? I mean, I understand Errol Spence Jr. is a unified welterweight champion of the world, which is great. I mean, totally great that he's accomplished that. I think he's arguably the best welterweight in the world. We're going to have to see how he does against Terrence Bud Crawford when and if they actually meet. But really, are we really saying that Canelo's biggest challenge is going to be against the guy that currently fights and has always fought in the welterweight division? I don't think so. I don't think that that is really the what people actually want to believe. Or it is what they want to believe, but do they actually believe that? Canelo, who has fought at 154, at 160, granted he did fight at welterweight as a teenager, but really? Are we really saying that Canelo's biggest potential opponent, the most competitive fight for Canelo, is going to be against a welterweight? With all due respect to Errol Spence Jr., Errol Spence is and has always been, as a professional, a welterweight. I mean, how somebody could make the argument that that is a bigger opponent for him and a more competitive fight for him than Dimitri Bivol, I mean, it just doesn't make much sense to me. It just doesn't make much sense to me. All right, I understand that he's the WBC, WBA, IBF champion of the world in the welterweight division. Welterweight division, not in the junior middleweight division, which I'm going to get to in a moment. Not in the middleweight division, which I'm going to get to in a moment. Not in the super middleweight division, which, again, I am going to get to in a moment. Errol Spence Jr. is the champion at 147 pounds. And by the way, has unfinished business at 147 pounds against Bud Crawford. So how somebody could make the argument that that would be a tougher fight for Canelo than Dimitri Bivol, an undefeated WBA super 175-pound champion, to me is nonsensical at best. Nonsensical at best, dishonest at worst. I mean, it's crazy. So salute to Thomas Jones, salute to Avon Barksdale. People have actually told me about the Chisora thing. I think it's the beard. I think it's the beard. I'm actually a lot taller than him, and he's actually a lot bigger than me physically. But salute to you, brother. So let's get that one out of the way, right? Errol Spence Jr. is not going to be the most competitive fight for Canelo Alvarez. It's just not going to happen. That's not the reality of the situation. All right, so what's another name that's been thrown around? Jamal Charlo. Okay? And by the way, Canelo wouldn't gain anything by fighting Errol Spence Jr. Errol Spence Jr.'s titles wouldn't be on the line because Canelo ain't making 147 pounds. But let's go to Jamal Charlo. Jamal Charlo is a middleweight, right? He's the WBC middleweight champion, who, by the way, went the full distance against Montiel, who, by the way, was knocked out by Jaime Munguia, who, by the way, is about to take on a guy that Demetrius Andrade already beat. So I get it, he's undisputed. I get it, he's a world champion. I get that. I honestly do. I get that. But to say that these guys would be more competitive against Canelo Alvarez than a full-fledged light heavyweight champion, to me is ridiculous. It's absurd. It's nonsensical. All right? It's nonsensical. And like I said, that's at best. At worst, it's dishonest. All right? But what we have right now is a situation where people have become fans of promoters. All right? And by extension, they become fans of fighters who fight for those promoters. So it's like, are you a Mets fan or are you a Yankees fan? Right? Are you an Arsenal fan or are you a Tottenham fan? Right? Are you a Liverpool fan or are you a Manchester fan? Or are you a Man City fan? I don't know. I mean, you know, are you a Bulls fan or are you a Lakers fan? Right? Avon says he's Aston Villa. I actually like Crystal Palace myself, South London all day. All right? But, I mean, it's like your fandom for these promoters is like non-ending regardless of the facts on the ground. All right? So, ask yourselves this. If Canelo fought Charlo at 168 pounds, what would he gain by doing that? What would he gain by winning that fight? He wouldn't gain a title, all right? And if he wins, what are people going to say? Oh, well, Charlo was a middleweight. Charlo moved up in weight. Charlo was too small for Canelo, right? I mean, you can hear it already. You know, you can hear it. Maestro. But these guys are undefeated. But. Yeah, Bivol is undefeated. Bivol is undefeated, and he's a 175-pound champion. So if Canelo takes on Errol Spence Jr., all right, 3-belt welterweight champion of the world at a catch weight, what does Canelo gain? 0. And even if he wins, this is an asterisk. Oh, it's a catch weight. Oh, Errol Spence Jr. is a middleweight, a welterweight. Jamal Charlo, he's a middleweight. Oh, Canelo beat him, but whatever. I mean, those guys are too small. Those guys they never stood a chance. So, I mean, again, why would he fight him, right? So we move on to David Benavidez Jr. Granted, he's much bigger, but what are the facts on the ground? The facts on the ground, you know, and I'm sitting here, I'm close to the ground here in Madison, at the MGM Grand, where I'm filming this live or streaming this live, right? What are the facts on the ground? What does Canelo accomplish by beating David Benavidez Jr.? Is David Benavidez a world champion? No. Maestro, he used to be. Yeah, he used to be. He used to be. And by the way, he's fighting for an interim title against David Lemieux. All right? The same fans that want him to fight Canelo, I haven't heard them complaining about the David Lemieux fight. David Lemieux, a former middleweight world champion who got knocked out by Gennady Golovkin. What does Canelo accomplish by beating David Benavidez Jr.? Sorry, I always say Junior. He's not Junior. It's David Benavidez. His older brother's Junior. All right? What does he accomplish? All right? He has the belts. He has all 4 championships at 168 pounds. He's undisputed. I mean, when you're undisputed, what does that mean? It's pretty obvious. Hashtag undisputed. Undisputed means that you're undisputed, meaning there's no dispute. You're the best in the division. You're undisputed. Canelo's undisputed at 168. So again, taking on a former world champion at 168 pounds, what does that accomplish? Salute to the new media today, USA Boxing, Coach Malika. He says, I'm tired of Canelo ducking Errol Spence, Maestro, a guy that's a career welterweight. Exactly. Exactly. Salute Haplotype and salute Centurion's son. Right? So what's on the table exactly on the PBC side of the street that Canelo needs, that Canelo should want? Errol Spence Jr., the welterweight? Jermall Charlo, who, by the way, hasn't beat anyone of note as a middleweight champion? Or David Benavidez, a guy who's not a champion in the division that Canelo is already undisputed in? Guys, it's not really too hard to comprehend. All of these people that are hating on the Canelo versus Bivol fight are out of their fucking minds. That's what it is. They're out of their fucking minds. They've gone loco, all right? At best, it's nonsensical. At best, it's hypocritical. Because by the way, again, they don't have a problem with Sulecki fighting Charlo. They don't have a problem with Lemieux taking on David Benavidez. They don't have a problem with that. But for some reason, they have a problem with Canelo taking on Bivol. What's up with that? Let's break down Dimitri Bivol real quick. Dude's undefeated, okay? He's got a WBA super title at 175 pounds. And by Canelo taking him on, Canelo, guess what? Gets a belt against a legit champion in a legit, original, historical OG weight class, the light heavyweight division. All right, it's the same division that Spinks fought in. Right, it's the same division that Roy Jones Jr. fought in. All right, and you're going way back. I mean, it's an original OG division in the sport of boxing. Canelo, tomorrow night, here in Las Vegas, is going to be taking on a legit world champion in that weight class. But Maestro, I never heard of this guy. He's from Europe. Yeah, Sulecki's from Europe. Where the Charlo fans complaining about that? And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with being from Europe. There obviously isn't anything wrong with being from Europe, unless you're a Canelo opponent, right? Because apparently Callum Smith, who I thought was the best champion at 168 pounds, right, was just a Euro bum. He was no good. Canelo shouldn't have fought him, right? Billy Joe Saunders, Euro bum. Canelo shouldn't have fought him. Who's this guy from Europe? Who's this white boy from Europe? Maestro, how dare he fight these guys? They were legitimate world champion. What you talking about? What you talking about, right? By the way, okay, I didn't hear anything about him taking on Caleb Plant, who, by the way, I always felt was an inferior opponent to Billy Joe Saunders, was an inferior opponent to Callum Smith. All right, but when he took on Caleb Plant, I think Caleb Plant has a chance, Maestro. He's got a good jab, Maestro. He's going to box and move and take Canelo deep rounds and possibly win unanimous decision, Maestro. Really? Really? I mean, look, Coach Malachi, I saw him in the chat. I've seen a lot of other people in the chat here today that called that fight exactly how it was. Okay? Canelo was going to win that fight by KO. That was always going to happen. And by the way, not because Caleb Plant is a bad boxer, he's a good boxer, but because he's not Canelo. And just because I said he isn't as good as Billy Joe Saunders or Callum Smith, I don't know what kind of where Billy Joe Saunders is going these days, but Callum Smith was legit, Billy Joe Saunders was legit, and Avni Yildirim was a mandatory defense, right? So all of these people saying, "Oh no, Maestro, Charlo's fans are all mandatory defenses." And what about Canelo? What about Canelo? Is he not allowed to take on mandatory defenses to keep his fight, to keep his title? Slight tendency salute. All right. Coach Malachi says, if these guys didn't have a double standard, they wouldn't have won at all. I mean, as I said, it's hypocrisy at best. All right. It's stupidity at best. It's, you know, just a total misreading of the situation at best. At worst, it's just hating. All right. There's always haters, right? You know, Jordan even had haters. LeBron, wow, he has a ton of haters, right? Name your favorite footballer. He's got haters, right? So this is nothing new for an elite athlete. But what I don't really like about this whole situation is that Canelo has actually done something that has been great for boxing fans. Within less than a calendar year, he fought 4 times. Not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 times. He fought 4 times. 3 of those fights were against established world champions, right? And what about Yildirim? Again, Yildirim was a mandatory defense. Stop it with the Yildirim. Stop it with the Yildirim. All right? People keep bringing up Yildirim as if it proves a point. What does it prove? Do we not remember the opponents that Roy Jones took on? Do we not remember that? But Roy was still a great fighter, right? He had his mandatory defenses. Do we not remember the whole bum of the club situation that was brought up with regards to Joe Louis? All right? As Centurion's son says, to be undisputed, he had to fight Yildirim. It's that simple. It's that simple. He had to fight Yildirim, right? So again, I'm not really understanding this. As I switch over here for a second, right? I'm not really understanding this personally, but you know, as a logical person, I don't understand it. But if you understand the psychology of a hater, it's very simple to understand. See, the hater sees no good and only sees bad and wrong in any situation that the person they hating on is involved in, right? I mean, that's what it is. I mean, again, people are literally bringing up, Maestro, people, he should be fighting a welterweight. He should be fighting a middleweight. He should be fighting a 168-pounder. All of these guys would be more competition than the guy he's taking on, this guy from Russia. I don't even like Russia. What's Russia? This guy's from Europe. Is it Europe? Like it maybe. Just stop it. Just stop it. All right? If you have any criticism about this fight, I'm going to give you one thing that maybe you should be critical of. And it's not even Canelo's fault. It's not his problem. It's not his fault. The one thing that you could maybe be critical about this fight for is the fact that it's on pay-per-view. I mean, it's as simple as that. It's on pay-per-view. Is this a better fight than Callum Smith? I don't know. Is it a bigger fight than Billy Joe Saunders? Billy Joe Saunders and Canelo did over 73,000 at Cowboy Stadium, right? So, should we really be seeing this fight on pay-per-view? Well, guys, I mean, it's Canelo, all right? He's the biggest cash cow in boxing, all right? I think that's blatantly apparent now, especially now that AJ has lost. All right. Although I do believe that with this Saudi Arabia money, that it's going to be probably a big event, big money-making event in Saudi Arabia, right? But, I mean, realistically, you know, to pay Canelo what he demands, to pay Canelo what he's worth in the boxing market, you kind of have to put this on pay-per-view, unfortunately. I understand that it's on free TV in Mexico. I got that. I understand that you don't have to pay for pay-per-view when you're watching it on DAZN if you're in Europe. I understand that. But the United States of America, with its 300+ million people, is the biggest boxing market and is a market where people are willing to pay pay-per-view for fights, especially for superstar fighters. So Stark's Cinema, you're saying it's $18 at the movie theater. Go to the movie theater, yo. All right? And I'm sure that they will allow people to watch it as part of their DAZN package maybe a week from now, all right? So hold off for a week. You'll probably be able to watch it for free on DAZN. But I got news for all of the haters, okay? And unsurprisingly, none of them are really subscribed to my channel or participate in my chat. A couple trolls do, but that's always okay. I got news for the haters. This fight here, all right, taking place tomorrow night here in Las Vegas. This fighter here, who's going to be taking on Canelo here in Vegas, is a really good fighter. He was a really good fighter as an amateur, and he's been a really good fighter as a pro. And yes, we haven't been seeing him knocking out his opponents of late, but he's been boxing them easily. I've said it before, Bivol barely gets out of first gear when he's fighting these guys. He's going to have to get out of first gear tomorrow night. He's going to have to get out of second gear. He's going to have to get out of third gear. He's going to have to go to fourth or fifth or sixth. All right, you might tell that I drive manual transmission. So, you know, those sports car manual transmission cars, they go up to sixth gear, right? It's kind of difficult to get a manual transmission car in the U.S. these days, but that's another story. The point is, Bivol is going to have to get out of first gear, which he hasn't really had to do to comprehensively beat his opponents of late. He's going to have to do that. But he's a good opponent. He's a solid opponent. And when you look at the opponents that Bivol has faced, and when you look at the opponents that Canelo has faced, other than Floyd and possibly Triple G, I say possibly Triple G because let's keep it real, Triple G's list of opponents, in my opinion, humble opinion, is paper thin. And Canelo fought him at 160, not at 175, where he's taking on Bivol. You could make an argument that after Floyd Mayweather Jr., Bivol is Canelo's toughest opponent. I think he's a tougher opponent than Daniel Jacobs, again, because he's 175. I think he's a better opponent than the guys Canelo ran through at 168 pounds, again, because he's a good boxer, and again, because he's a legit 175-pounder. So, look, Canelo's taking on challenges, right? And, you know, we just got to ignore the haters and enjoy this fight for what it is. It's Canelo, the undisputed champion at 168, moving back up to 175 to take a legit, not Reggie belt, not fringe title. You know, people may not like this, but I still pretty much consider the WBO title like a fringe title. I don't rate it up there with the other ones. Look, I'm sorry, I'm an 80s baby. I grew up watching boxing in the 90s. The WBO, when I grew up and started watching boxing, was not the shit. It just wasn't. And, you know, I'm going to admit my bias on it, and I'm admitting it, and I'm also actually explaining it. All right? This ain't the WBA Reggie belt. All right, this isn't a WBC Diamond belt or Emeritus belt or franchise belt. All right, he's taking on a legit world champion. And by the way, he may be the best light heavyweight in the division. You could make that argument, right? There are a lot of people out there that think that Bivol beats Beterbiev. Now, granted, there's a lot of people out there that think that Beterbiev beats Bivol, but that's why they're 1 and 2. Joe Smith ain't really in that discussion because Bivol already beat him, comprehensively beat him. All right, he comprehensively beat him. So this is a real fight against a real opponent who's accomplished, who's a good boxer, who does have power, because let's not forget, he knocked out most of his opponents until 2018 when he stopped knocking them out, right? I think the last knockout win was against Isaac Chilemba. That's just off the top of my head. If I'm wrong about that, my bad. I'll correct the record at some other point. But the idea that somebody could make the argument that Errol Spence Jr., that Jermall Charlo, or that David Benavidez would pose more of a challenge than Artur Beterbiev, I mean, it's crackpot stupidity. It's what it is. It's crackpot stupidity. And honestly, I was there yesterday at the press conference. I didn't participate in that scrum, all right? Because honestly, I don't really need to report on Eddie Hearn's reaction to a stupid-ass question, which is what that was. I don't know who asked it. I don't know the guy's name. You know, I get it. You know, you want to ask Eddie Hearn something provocative and get a response out of him that you're going to throw up on the internet and get a lot of clicks. I get that. But I don't want to be that dude. I'm sorry. I don't want to be the dude that goes up to Eddie Hearn with a camera phone or with a DLSR camera and a mic and says, hey, Eddie, why isn't he taking on Errol Spence Jr.? Hey, Eddie, why isn't he taking on Jermall Charlo? Hey, Eddie, why isn't he taking on David Benavidez? Really? Nah, I know y'all don't turn into this channel for that kind of shit, right? And as someone who started to cover fights and who has been credentialed to fights as of recent, all right, going back to late last year, my first credentialed fight was the Teofimo Lopez Gambosis fight. You know, I don't want to start things off, nor do I want to be that guy at any moment that asks PBC fanboy questions. Right? I don't really want to do that. Y'all here for the Canelo fight?
Canelo by a million. Canelo by a million. Come on, you be stupid not to.
There you go. Lay it at the sports book. All right, we got fans here in the MGM Grand. So that's my thing on this. Like, hey Eddie, the PBC had a better deal than you did. Why didn't Canelo take it? Hey Eddie, please answer this question, Eddie. Eddie, why isn't he fighting for the PBC? Why did he leave after the Caleb Plant fight? Isn't Charlo a better fight for Canelo than Dimitri Bivol? What? You must be out your fucking mind. I mean, to think that, let alone ask a question like that, is insanity to me. You know? You might as well say, hey, Eddie, can you give me some clicks for my YouTube channel? Really? So, guys, like I said, all right, as I wrap this up, appreciate it for what it is. This is Canelo moving up in weight for a second time to 175 pounds. All right, he's not taking on Kovalev, right? Because we all heard the excuses for the Kovalev win. Oh, you know, Anthony Yard really weakened him prior to the Canelo fight. Anthony Yard really did damage to Kovalev, and that win was an asterisk win, Maestro. Really? Anthony Yard. Anthony Yard. Okay. Just stop it. All right? Kovalev was Kovalev. He was the crusher. Before that fight happened, you know what I heard? Maestro, Kovalev's got a great jab. He's bigger than Canelo. The weight is going to be too much. The height is going to be too much. He's a full-fledged light heavyweight, Maestro. And then guess what? As he started off in that fight, Kovalev, that is, all right, I was on Twitter. I saw the people saying, oh, look at the jab. I told you guys. I told Kovalev was going to pound him with the jab. I told you guys Kovalev was going to win. And then that brutal knockout happened, and then what? Right? And then what? After that, it was, oh, well, that, you know, Anthony Yard softened him up. He wasn't ready. He wasn't ready for Canelo because of Anthony Yard. Okay. So look, he's moving up to 175 again. What's the excuse going to be this time? Right? There's no excuses. This dude is undefeated. He ain't lose to Andre Ward twice. Right? He isn't coming off a hard fight against Anthony Yard. Right? This is an undefeated WBA super 175-pound champion. All right? There's no excuses. All right? And after this fight, the last thing I want to hear is, oh, well, I told you, Maestro, Bivol was not a good opponent, and Canelo should have taken on Errol Spence Jr. No, Errol Spence got unfinished business at welterweight, where he's always been. Yeah, but, you know, he really should have been taking on Jermall Charlo. Again, Charlo is a 160-pound champion that has really not had a signature win. I mean, you could argue that his best win, I think this is the only argument you could make, that his best win was against Deverenchenko, all right? A guy who pushed Triple G to his limits. And I thought beat Triple G. So let's give him Deverenchenko. But does Deverenchenko really prepare you for Canelo, or does a win against Deverenchenko and Montiel at 160 mean that people should be clamoring to see you against Canelo, the undisputed champion at 168? Of course not. Of course not. Right? So that's where we are, right? And then after David Lemieux probably will get beat by David Benavidez, Battle of the Davids, David versus David, right? Oh, I told you. Look, you see how powerful he is? You see how big and strong he is? I told you we should have taken on this guy and not Bivol. Look, the playbook is very simple, guys. We all know it, right? So, I mean, it's the psychology of a fan base that essentially is a fan of a promotional team or a promotional outlet or an advisory group or whatever you want to call them, and they just can't take it, all right? They can't take that their fighters have been playing the Canelo sweepstakes, all right, thinking that they the shit, all right, and that because they've done things at 147 or at 160 or at 168, that these fighters, all right, again, according to this group of people, right, that these fighters deserve a Canelo shot. They don't even fight in his division. They ain't ranked in his division. Okay, David Benavidez is, but the other two aren't, all right? But the question is never asked, what have they done? Who have they beat? Why should Canelo fight them? And the answer to that is simple. They haven't really beaten anyone of note, all right? They don't have a title that Canelo is interested in, and Canelo ain't going down to fight in their weight classes. So, I mean, it is what it is, right? It is what it is. And by the way, you know, if Canelo decides to continue his career at 175, which I think would be a good look for him, trying to be undisputed in two weight classes, at that point, maybe these guys should move up to 175. Would their the PBC fan base be okay with that? Would they want that? Would they want to see Errol Spence Jr. fighting at 175 against Canelo? I'm not even saying Canelo should take that fight, but I mean, really? You want Canelo to fight Charlo at 175? Look, this dude here, real fighter. This dude here, probably the best fighter up to 175 pounds. And we'll see it on Saturday night, right? We'll see it on Saturday night. I don't really like making predictions, but I saw a couple people in the chat. Look, this is boxing, anything can happen, right? But gun to head, if I had to bet on an outcome, I would be betting on Canelo by KO. Just because of the fact that he's been KOing everybody. Kovalev, Smith. Actually, he didn't KO Smith, right? In fact, Smith, if you want to argue for the unanimous decision victory by Canelo, would be a good fight to look at because he's big, he's strong, he's sturdy, all right, and he was able to go the distance, all right? But he KO'd Kovalev, all right? He really beat up Smith really badly to the point where I honestly thought that the corner led by Joe Gallagher should have probably thrown in the towel, but I think they know their fighter better than we do, and they knew that he would go the distance and that he'd live to see another day and go on to do great things in boxing. And guess what? He did. The very next fight, it was scary what he did to Lenin Castillo. It was nothing short of scary. So, yeah, I mean, Canelo by UD is a possibility. Depending on how sturdy Bivol is and how he can withstand Canelo's punches. Very interesting to me was the weights today. Canelo weighed in at 174.4, I think. This is off the top of my head. I'm pretty sure that's what it was. And Bivol weighed in at 174.6. 174.6. You from Toronto? You from Toronto? Okay. Yeah. All right. So 174.6. So, you know, a little bit heavier than Canelo. He's definitely taller than Canelo. I just saw a Raptors fan there. So, I got distracted. So, yeah. I mean, I would probably bet the KO. All right. But the UD is definitely a high possibility, very high possibility. I just saw a chat there that I want to look at. See it over here. All right. YouTube account. Very, very generic name, my friend, but I ain't judging. All right. I ain't judging. You don't have to be out here using your government. All right, just make sure you hit that subscribe button, that like button, and ding that notification bell. Bring it back up. I'm working off my phone here right now. There's two types of Canelo haters. The ones who are always saying that the opponents are too weak, and the ones who always saying that Canelo gonna lose. This is true. I mean, and the funny thing is, the ones who say that he's going to lose then turn it around and say, oh, well, that guy wasn't that great anyways. Case in point, Caleb Plant. A lot of people, all right, that rock with a certain advisory group / promotional outfit, if they didn't think that Caleb Plant was going to win, they definitely wanted him to win and then said that he would win. And then after the fight said, oh, well, you know, this guy wasn't that good. Okay. Going into that fight, I actually said, despite the fact that he held the IBF 168-pound championship, that he was at best the third best heavy 168-pounder signed to the PBC, and I got a lot of hate for it. Right? I got a lot of hate for it. Right? Because I put David Benavidez ahead of him, and I also put David Morrell Jr. ahead of him. All right, and a lot of people didn't really want to agree with that, but you know, that's what it is. All right, so look, it is what it is. Enjoy the fight this weekend. All right, and you know, it should be a highly competitive fight. Bivol is a real opponent, and yeah, you know, it is what it is. I got a question. I think it was from Mello asking me what I care about these people think. I mean, at the end of the day, I respect boxing. I respect boxers, and I don't really like the fact that this dude right here, Bivol, is getting like disrespected, right? So I got a content. I express my thoughts on people kind of dogging this fight, which I think is actually a good fight, and also expressing a logical argument that's obviously an opinion, but it's a logical argument with some factual evidence that this is actually a very competitive fight and is more competitive than anything Canelo would have had to fight or engage with had he continued his career fighting with the PBC. It's as simple as that, all right? I don't like Bivol getting disrespected. And I don't really, as a fight fan, I don't really like this fight getting disrespected. Even in a press conference with credentialed media asking these questions. All right, so salute to everyone. Thank you for tuning in. Hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, hit that notification bell, and stay tuned because I'll be going live fight week, all right? I'll be going live before the fight and possibly during the fight tomorrow, all right? Thank you, everyone. Live here from the MGM Grand, and hope to see y'all tomorrow or later on. You know, enjoy the fight.